Yeah, blessings, my people. You don't know say my views TV. So with the blessed ones. Well, blessed ones. Before we start with the one here, we just want to say this video you might contain some violent scenes. You might hear some language that you might want to hear and them things there. But we just want to say my views TV don't promote violence. Promote violence. We don't encourage violence. We don't glorify violence in no kind of way. We just watch these videos and hopefully we learn something at the end of the day from these videos, you know. Hopefully that you could either learn from somebody else's mistake or take the positive from this video and realize most of all that this life here is not worth it. You see it? And if you live in it, just look at what's happening to other people and realize, like, you know what I mean, these things could happen to you. So at the end of the day, let's take the positive from these videos. So big up on yourself, blessed ones. You don't know the thing. Go rest in peace to everybody that lose their life in these videos. Like, you know what I mean? Like, condolence go to their family, brother. And yeah, let's get into this and see what going. Bless ones big up on their damn self. This is history of the Toronto Rexdale Crips. Yeah, go check out this.
Oh, a tragic story from Rexdale now. One man is dead after a drive-by shooting. Sadly,
at the scene of yet another daytime shooting in Toronto, this time the Rexdale neighborhood.
It's an all too familiar scene in Rexdale in Toronto's North End. A massive police car
shot and killed in Rexdale overnight. The shooting happened on Bergamot Avenue. That's near
Rexdale's a notoriously known neighborhood, located in the northwest corner of Toronto. It's a large area, consisting of countless different buildings, complexes, residential areas, and essentially different little communities. Unfortunately, dating back decades, this area of the city's been known for gun violence, drug trafficking, and it's been home to a ton of different gangs, all seeming to have one thing in common, being Crips. The origins of the gang can be traced back decades, so let's take a look back at the history of the Rexdale Crips. Let's first take a look at the founding of Rexdale as a whole. We start all the way back in 1955, when a real estate developer named Rex Hetzlop purchased farmland in the area for $110,000. He then constructed houses and created a small neighborhood. The properties were listed at...
Yo, you hear what the man do? Buy a piece of farmland, you know, and put up houses and do anything, you know. Alright, this, yo, I would tell you got money, brother, you know, go buy land and, anyway.
Back in 1955, when a real estate developer named Rex Hetzlop purchased farmland in the area for $110,000. He then constructed houses and created a small neighborhood. The properties were listed at between $10,000 to $12,000. They sold well, and soon enough, 330 families were living in his new development, and Rexdale was born. As the community grew, Rex himself then built a large center that he would call Rexdale Plaza, which is now known as Rexdale Mall. Over the next decade, Rexdale continued to grow, and different housing started to be constructed all over the area. Rexdale's first residents were English and Scottish, but things would soon change in the 1960s, when major amendments were made to the Canada's immigration legislation, essentially making it easier for people to enter the country. Over the next few decades, an influx of Caribbean and West Indian immigrants, followed by Somalian and Ethiopian, began to slowly migrate into Toronto. By the late 1970s, a once predominantly European Rexdale found itself diversified and became a multicultural area. Rexdale was a peaceful area for a period of time, thanks to the availability of manual labor jobs to immigrants. Unfortunately, the economy would soon cause things to change. In the 1980s, those same factory jobs that were once plentiful had now become scarce, with the introduction of more office-based work and jobs that required higher qualifications. Things would then start to go downhill for Rexdale as a community throughout the next decade. In the late 1980s is when basically all hell broke loose. With no jobs around, a lot of residents, specifically young men, turned to the streets to try and find a way to make a living. Now this is around the time where crack cocaine had just hit the street market, which only amplified the crime in the area. Decade. In the late 1980s is when basically all hell broke loose. With no jobs around, a lot of residents, specifically young men, turned to the streets to try and find a way to make a living. Now this is around the time where crack cocaine had just hit the street market, which only amplified the crime in the area. Now, as I mentioned, the first immigrants in the 60s to arrive in
Remember the video when we doing it, brother? I may say, what's really destroying our black communities? Go check out that video there. Yeah, I done a video saying what's really destroying our black communities. Yeah, go check out the video and let me know what you think, blessed ones. If you reach yes already, please go check out that video there and let me know what you think. I might actually link it. The link I got in this. The link I got in this. I go try to put the link in at the top of the video up on the right. Yeah, all right.
Market, which only amplified the crime in the area. Now, as I mentioned, the first immigrants in the 60s to arrive in Rexdale were mostly Caribbean and West Indian descent, with people from Somalia and Ethiopia coming shortly after. Now, this offset arrival of different ethnicities, along with the shortage of jobs, and now this new drug, crack, it caused some tension within the community that often resulted in violent clashes. This would lead young men in the area to start to come together to form groups and cliques. Now, they wouldn't be classified as a gang at the time. These were just informal packs of friends who just stood by each other. But things would soon change. Now, at the time, gang culture like Crips and Bloods was already booming in Los Angeles, United States. It then spread throughout the US, reaching east out to New York, and it eventually made its way into Toronto. It seemed like the young men in the city accepted the newfound gang culture with open arms. So formal Crips and Blood gangs started to materialize around the city. In Rexdale's case, all the gangs that began to spread out within the city all shared one common trait, being Crips. But the founding of the different gangs in Rexdale didn't all happen at the same time. It first began with a group of young men in Jamestown, who were previously named the Jamestown Crew. Now, Jamestown is a housing co-op located on Jamestown Crescent, also known as Doomstown. Now, this crew decided to claim Crips, and so essentially a new gang was created, which would be called Newborn Crips, or simply the Jamestown Crips. A short time later, another group within Rexdale began to catch on to the new culture, and they too decided to make an official gang. And so, Stovetop Crips were founded. Now, Stovetop is a nickname for a housing co-op, located between 1801 and 1827 Martin Grove Road. Jamestown and Stovetop were both Crip gangs and were aligned, but they remained as their own entities respectfully. Now, the Crips culture influenza would continue spreading throughout Rexdale from its root of Jamestown. It now spread a bit east of Stovetop to a complex of townhouses on Orpington Crescent. Now, the group that existed in the complex before Crips had alliance with the group in Jamestown, so naturally they adapted the Crips card as well. This faction would be known as the O-Block Crips. Now, with 3 official Crip gangs in Rexdale, it would still continue to spread. It found its way to a set of townhouses in a neighborhood on Mount Olive Drive. Now, there was already a group in the area who named themselves the Mount Olive Crew, but once they were introduced to the Crip culture by their locals of Jamestown, they conformed to it quickly. With another set being consumed by the new ideology, sure enough, the Crip way of life continued to take over Rexdale. It now reached Tandridge Crescent, which is a neighborhood a ways southeast of the other Crips. This is one of the larger areas of Rexdale, consisting of multiple complexes and a couple high-rise buildings as well. The group that existed, who were also aligned with Jamestown, called themselves the Tandridge Crips, another group of young men that proved to be open to becoming Crips. With mostly all gangs in Rexdale identifying as Crips, 2 more groups would end up joining the pack. A group that lived in a set of buildings on Humberline Drive at some point began to claim Crips, as well as a group of youth that went by Bergamot Crew, who were situated in a patch of buildings on Bergamot Avenue. Therefore, 2 more factions were created, the Humberline and Bergamot Crips. These new additions would make the area of Rexdale home to a whopping 7+ different Crips gangs. Now, with all of Rexdale being consumed by Crips, it seemed like things wouldn't be too violent within the area, considering all the gangs identified as the same prefix, but this wasn't the case. Things would change after an incident that took place in August of the year 2000. On Tuesday, August 29th, police responded to a shots fired call to 1817 Martin Grove Road and found a victim suffering gunshot wounds to his back. He was rushed to the hospital but died. The victim was identified as 22-year-old Lloyd Dean, who went by Blurty, a well-known Mount Olive Crips member. Now, the Jamestown's Crips were blamed for the murder, and so a war that would end up going on for decades was then born. With the new tension between the 2 Crip sets, Jamestown and Mount Olive, the others...
You see, you know? All them in the same gang, you know? and you couldn't find a way for reason or whatsoever it is. Meta before the first person get shot, the man with them shot in the back. Before them shoot the man, them couldn't find another way for reason it just for the fact that I were Crips. Excuse me, boy. You know, whatever argument that you got, you couldn't find a way to deal with it than to lead to the shooting there that now lead to a whole years of murders.
War that would end up going on for decades was then born. With the new tension between the two Crip sets, Jamestown and Mount Olive, the other sets within Rexdale were forced to side with one of the two gangs. Given a tough choice, all the other Crip sets decided that they would pair with the Jamestown side of the battle, and so Mount Olive Crips were left to fend for themselves against all the opposing Crip forces. This war would result in countless homicides.
Imagine that they know, you know. Imagine that they know, you know. Let me go back a little bit. Hold on.
Bergamot Crips. These new additions would make the area of Rexdale home to a whopping 7+ different Crips gangs. Now, with all of Rexdale being consumed by Crips, it seemed like things wouldn't be too violent within the area, considering all the gangs identified as the same prefix, but this wasn't the case. Things would change after an incident that took place in August of the year 2000. On Tuesday, August 29th, police responded to a shots fired call to 1817 Martin Grove Road and found a victim suffering gunshot wounds to his back. He was rushed to the hospital but died. The victim was identified as 22-year-old Lloyd Dean, who went by Blurty, a well-known Mount Olive Crips member. Now, the Jamestown's Crips were blamed for the murder, and so a war that would end up going on for decades was then born. With the new tension between the two Crip sets, Jamestown and Mount Olive, the other sets within Rexdale were forced to side with one of the two gangs. Given a tough choice, all the other Crip sets decided that they would pair with the Jamestown side of the battle, and so Mount Olive Crips were left to fend.
Imagine that there. All of you together and cool and this and that and whatnot. No. Imagine this now that all of you rep the same gang Crips. And every other gang in the town that align with Crip as well decide to go against you. Them not even decide to say, okay, who was wrong? How we gonna solve this problem here? Because a man lose him life and basically him to lose him life too. So if I know that, how this a go solve? How it a go solve? But instead, the man them decide to go, hey, let me tell you, you know, everything is sweet until it's sour, yeah?
Rexdale were forced to side with one of the two gangs. Given a tough choice, all the other Crip sets decided that they would pair with the Jamestown side of the battle, and so Mount Olive Crips were left to fend for themselves against all the opposing Crip forces. This war would result in countless homicides and shootings around Rexdale over the years, with all the blocks being within walking distance of each other. Now, throughout time...
You hear that? All of the blocks them are walking distance between each other, you know? Walking distance between each other, you know? And them a war. You would feel, say, you drive from your soto down the soto. Walking distance. Well, boy.
All the other Crip sets decided that they would pair with the Jamestown side of the battle, and so Mount Olive Crips were left to fend for themselves against all the opposing Crip forces. This war would result in countless homicides and shootings around Rexdale over the years, with all the blocks being within walking distance of each other. Now, throughout time, Mount Olive wouldn't be the only block that the other Rexdale Crips would end up beefing with. They all shared common enemies, with the Uptop Driftwood Crips, Southside Falstaff Crips, as well as the Ardwick Bloods and Dixon City Bloods, amongst others. All of these feuds converted not only Rexdale, but almost all of Northeast Toronto into an active war zone. Now, the Toronto police didn't just have a blind eye the entire time while gangs around the city started to form and take over the inner streets. Over the years, they found themselves nabbing individuals here and there for what would be considered petty charges, before eventually realizing they needed to look at the bigger picture and put together a bigger project. In May of 2006, gun violence in Toronto was at an all-time high. Police had a lot on their plate, with a bunch of different gangs from throughout the city at war with each other. Amongst them were the Jamestown Crips, which after investigation seemed to be a good contender for a raid. To the police, the Jamestown crew were the center and the origins of the Crips in Rexdale, and therefore had some type of influence on the rest of the gang structure, so they decided to focus on them. Rexdale as a whole were responsible for enough shootings to be a prime target for police, so they put together what would be dubbed Project XXX. In late May, 600 officers from different forces around the GTA joined together, and on an early morning they raided around 60 residences in Jamestown Crescent and also places associated with the Crips gang, ending with 78 people being arrested. At the end of the raid, they seized what was said to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, as well as 15 kilos of cocaine, which police said has a street value of over $2 million. The bust also resulted in 20 guns, including an AK-47 and MAC-10 being seized, as well as 2 vehicles related to the gang. Bill Blair, who was the police chief through many violent years in Toronto and piloted various raids, boasted about dismantling the gang, saying that quote-unquote the leadership of the Jamestown crew had been surgically removed from the community. A year later, he would end up raiding one of the Jamestown Crips' enemies, the Driftwood Crips. Now years continued to pass in the city, and not much seemed to change within the anatomy of the Rexdale Crips. All of the sets continued to get along with each other, except for the Mount Olive Crips. With this ongoing feud, along with the beef they have with a handful of other gangs, the shootings and violence within Rexdale sadly became a norm. Approaching the early 2010s, YouTube and other social media platforms were really starting to pick up, and frankly, they only provoked and instigated beefs. Now you had rappers from all over Toronto making music videos and rap songs and posting them on YouTube. And with things like Facebook enhancing word of mouth, these songs and videos would spread like wildfire, especially when the music was actually good. This was again a new way for gang members to diss, taunt, and mock each other, and ultimately just continue the cycle of gang violence in the city. There was now a new generation of young men, so fresh gangs would begin to form, such as IDS, sprouting from the Jamestown Crips. Another gang was also created, called Monsters, which was a faction of Mount Olive Crips, which allegedly was named after the monsters in Space Jam. Both these new additions would continue the trend of violence in Rexdale, and this activity once again caught the attention of police, and so they began investigating the new wave of gangs. This time, their main target was the Monsters gang, attempting to step in between the war of Mount Olive Crips and the rest of Rexdale. This would be a large, multi-year investigation, dubbed Project Pharaoh, which would eventually be executed in June of 2015. On June 4th, police executed over 50 search warrants targeting the complex on Mount Olive Drive, as well as residents that were associated with the gang. 32 alleged gang members were arrested, and police seized 14 guns, as well as 33 kilos of cocaine, estimated to be worth around $3.8 million, and just under $200,000 in cash. The police had once again put together a successful operation in hopes of tearing apart a ruthless gang. But the raids on sets around Rexdale over the years had seemed to just be putting a small dent in the foundation of the gang as a whole. Crime would continue at a steady rate over the years. Rexdale has been a violent area for decades now.
Yeah, me see some of them. Yeah. Me done a video on some of them. Yeah.
Estimated to be worth around $3.8 million, and just under $200,000 in cash. The police had once again put together a successful operation in hopes of tearing apart a ruthless gang. But the raids on sets around Rexdale over the years had seemed to just be putting a small dent in the foundation of the gang as a whole. Crime would continue at a steady rate over the years. Rexdale has been a violent area for decades now, with sadly no end in sight. The same gangs that existed back then still exist presently, with even more additions. The same feuds that were relevant back then can still be traced to this day, which results in a never-ending loop of gang violence. New rappers from Rexdale continue to emerge and shine a bigger spotlight on the area. Now for police, it seems like it's hard to keep up with gangs all throughout the city, let alone Rexdale and its abundance of Crips gangs. Unfortunately, it looks like the gang culture throughout Rexdale will be something prevalent for now, until some major changes are made. Until then, I guess it's up to the gangs themselves to dictate how safe they want their own neighborhood to be.
Well said, it's up to the gang to dictate how safe they want them neighborhood be, brother. Yes, well said. So blessed ones, big up on themselves. We watch another one here, so these are the Rexdale Crips, yeah? Still the Rexdale Crips. Yeah, man, I just want to tell you, we say learn from these things, blessed ones. Learn from other people's mistake and know, say like, you know, and everything you have to you know, you have to in it to learn from it, you know. And if you're in it, it's even better, because if you see somebody else make a mistake and you could better yourself from that, then that's how you're supposed to do it. So blessed ones, big up on your damn self. You don't know the thing on My Views TV or so. The blessed ones, yeah man, big up the whole of the blessed ones them that link in. You don't know the thing go.